So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity and elaborate, and the message which him is giving clearly shows that I am an old man. I've gone through rigmaroles of life. I'm already 78, but I'll like to share with you whatever little knowledge I have. But I am grateful to all of you that you have been, you know, interested in this course. And I think this is a unique course, and Himi was very instrumental in accepting the suggestion. And I think we can take it forward. It's just a beginning because villages remain important. Villages are important, were important, and shall remain important for the reason they are the one which has been the cradle of our culture, and they are the one who can take India forward to make any five, you can say, 5 trillion economy. But for the last 2 days, you must have been listening to experts, and they must have explained to you the total context of village planning and the village development. But as a planner, I would like to explain to you how villages could be planned in a rational development manner so that they contribute you know, their potential, they contribute their value to making India a most developed country in the world. But I would suggest I would take it forward to this that uh, the villages have their own problem. We'll come back to you, but villages. I have 2 points to make. Village are characterized by population, characterized by poverty, and when you are talking about the population, they contain large population, that's 69% of total India. And the population remain dispersed because we have 6,40,000 villages across India. With regard to poverty, I think poverty is greatest human curse which we have, and that unfortunately poverty remain concentrated in the rural area. And when you look at the poverty, poverty cannot be only with regard to resources, money. Poverty can with regard to skill, infrastructure, opportunities of gainful employment, quality of life, technology, innovation, education, health, and housing, social fabric, land, productivity, leadership, and political power. We can have those kind of limitation which are holding back the villages. But nevertheless, when we start the context, we look at the global context. This is recently you must have read 800 crores people living on this planet, and look at this, they are divided into five continents with red indicating the Asia, and you can see the demonstration and the clear leadership of Asia in terms of population. That's India and China holding more than 35% of this population. This global population is divided into 7 layers of human settlements. So there are two kind of human settlements. Either they can be village or they can be urban. So you have 7 layers. It's a conurbation, city, large city, small city, village, hamlet, and isolated development. Bottom 3 layers are the villages, and the top 4 layers are attributed to urban area. So when you look at the villages unfortunately are not defined in the Indian context. They are defined by exclusion because we are only defining the urban area, and whatever is not covered in urban becomes the rural. But the first definition of the village was given by French. When they defined it as a group of building comprising a small community which has clustered in its human settlement, but larger than a hamlet means one or two houses, but smaller than a town, with a population range of few hundred to few thousand, and having permanent dwellings. They are located fairly close to one another for reason of you know security and social connectivity, but they are one who only practice agriculture, and they are surrounded by large quarters which are used their living quarters are used by land which is used for agriculture. So agriculture, compactness, small number, and permanent housing, they define the villages. But English people called it, whenever there was a church, that they will call it a village. But India defines the in its own way. India, because I said there are two definition. India only define the urban and rest is rural. And in urban, they are talking about these two kind of towns: statutory towns and census town. Statutory towns are one which have a governance authority in terms of corporation, municipality, cantonment board, notified area committee, nagar panchayat, or a census also has its own definition. And when they are not covered under the status, they don't have a corporation or a statutory body of governance. They say place any human settlement which have a minimum population of 5,000. That's number one, population. Number two, what kind of activities they do. That is, at least 75% of the male working population must be engaged in activity other than agriculture. And thirdly, they must have a density of more than 400% per square kilometer. So three parameters: that's population, that's avocation, that's what kind of profession they exercise, and third, density, they distinguish it. So all those, these two covered, they will fall in urban and rest are rural. So there are 7,935, urban area which are there. Rest all are rural. So when we look at the town and the village, we look at one, where there is concentration, the other there is, dispersal. But we have, in Indian context, I'll define how we have gone. That this is how the population have grown in the last 100 years. We have grown, three times. In population we have grown five times, but urbanization level have gone only three times. We are at 31.1%, but number of settlements have gone four times. Rural population has increased three and a half times, and but urban population has grown 15 times. This is how the population is distributed. That's the 377 million people. That's 31.1%. They are living in 7,935 villages, and they are all concentrated in large cities as compared to the smaller towns. When you look at the rural population with which we are concerned now, they are it is 833 millions, and they constitute 69% of India's population, inhabited in 6,40,000 villages. But there are Bechirag villages where nobody lives in, so habitable where the people are living, that is around 6 lakhs, and out of that 6 lakh, 2 lakh 36,000 villages have population less than 5,000. But there are others, 4,681 villages which have more than 10,000 people. So you can see, they have larger than many of the village itself. So this is what they are doing. That we find, if the concentration of urban population in the largest city, similarly there is a concentration of population in the larger villages also. So every out of three, two Indians are living in villages. Every six Indian lives in large villages. And you can see globally, if you look at the total people, that every ninth person of the world is living in Indian villages. So you can see of, what is the context of rural population in India. So we look at the rural, So I will remind you about what father of the nation said about 100 years ago. He says India lives in villages. And you can see even after 90 years, the population, rural population continued to be 69%. So villages house large portion of Indian population. They also hold two-thirds of the households, and it is said, the projections are made, even when the urban population or urbanization level going up, still by 2050, we will have 50% of population living in rural India. So when you look at this, you can see, that the number of For every town, there are 80 villages. 1:80 is the ratio. And that is, you can see the population of rural India is naturally 2.5 times of what the urban population is. So villages remain critical. Villages are critical because they are provider of food. They are provider raw material for industry. They are promoter of national economy. They contribute to the GDP. They offer the largest consumer market, and they are also have the largest manpower. But rural economy remains primarily agrarian because they are dependent on agriculture. But unfortunately, Indian agriculture is characterized by lower productivity and its ancientness. It's not been modernized, which leads to poverty. And you can see the
सर
Indians. Yes,
अंदर वाला
please.
कंप्यूटर है ना, उसमें ऑफिस में
Hello.
चालन लाग रहा है, उस पे एक वो हेडफोन का टांग रखे है पतला सा।
Please, please mute.
हाँ
Mute.
वो बोलेगा
Please, please mute. Agriculture contribute.
सैनी सैनी
Agriculture contribute 1/7 of the India's gross domestic product. And it is. Hello. Could you please mute yourself?
You are
Hello.
genuine person. Why are you giving such a logic? बोले हेडफोन लिया कान में लाऊंगा और खा लगा
लग रही है धन्यवाद में क्या
Mahesh Bisnoy ji, please mute yourself.
Hello.
Mahesh Bisnoy
Hello.
ji, please mute yourself.
हेलो हेलो
लगाओगे कहीं ना कहीं तो
Please mute. Or please mute
हेलो
everybody.
मेरे चलता है
Hello.
हर देख ले तो के भी हैं नहीं है
ये कौन से बड़े काम के वो ना
उनका चुका दिए
ये को भी
Hello. Could you please mute yourself?
म्यूट योरसेल्फ सैनी लग रहा है पूरा बड़ा कर दिया।
Everybody, please mute. Otherwise I'm being disturbed. So when you look at this, agriculture, its contribution remains 14%. That is 1/7 of the total wealth in India is generated by agriculture. And it remains, basic system of sustenance and employment for 70% of Indians' population. But agriculture remains very, very vital and important for the reason because it gives you food security. It rationalizes the prices of food. It checks the inflation and also the wealth which nation generates. So it also affects the industry because rural income and demand will depend upon how much wealth agriculture generates. And also it will depend upon the productivity of agriculture. For the reason industry will all look forward to the cheaper input so as to provide affordable products to all people who are in the and who are the consumers. So you will find the context is over the years the public investment in rural India has been declining. There's a majority of land which is not you know irrigated. Yeah, assured irrigation because they are all rain fed. There's a power productivity declining because we are using land very intensively. Cash crops are missing. Agriculture diversification is on priority of the government but not on the people. Then there are large land holding which stand unconsolidated, but problem is India has very limited land and there is a limited land holding. So the output of the industry, the agriculture has been minimal, and that's what is creating a lot of problem for the Indian economy. You look at this, I said the poverty, 1/4 of the rural population live below poverty line, 1/3 survive on, a expenditure of 5,000 as against India's 1.79 lakh per capita per annum, that is per month. I'm talking about rural, this is around 60,000 rupees per annum as against India's 1.7 lakh. That's current when the Prime Minister said in the this current budget session. So rural development, we think we are easy to understand but difficult to implement. Rural areas or the villages continue to face the problem of physical development, land development, lack of adequate infrastructure, lack of connectivity in terms of transport, and also there is less flow of funds. So there is less alternative except to go for agriculture. There is less investment and skilling of the human beings living in rural India. So it is important that rural India is more focused in terms of employment, in terms of skilling, in terms of development, in terms of diversification, and also providing opportunities of better, livelihood. So the poverty will always remain a focus to be removed and to be eliminated. And please understand, if there is a decline of 1% in the agriculture growth, it can push back GDP by 0.5%. So they say if we are to achieve that, that 9% GDP or India to become 5 trillion economy, I think the agriculture sector must grow at minimum 4%. So the problem we have said, that we are trying to now crystallize what are the problem of rural India. It's always India versus Bharat, and we know urban rural divide is widening over the years. There's widening in terms of physical, social, healthcare, education indicator, but we have to understand no city exists in isolation, and there are always number of villages which are supporting and sustaining the urban activities. In fact, most of the problem which the urban areas are facing, it's because of the neglect of the rural areas and divorcing of rural development from the urban development. So, but we have to understand urban cities and villages, they are the two same coins of the same side, two sides of the same coin, and they can't be seen in isolation. If India as a nation has to grow, then we have to make sure the rural India and urban India, they are integrated, they are made to collaborate, cooperate, and they have to support mutually in order to make the entire growth and development rational. Let's look for a minute over the agriculture scenario. I will also like to explain to you, India is a highly stretched nation as a land holding is concerned. We have only 2.4% of the land. I'm repeating, we are having only 2.4% of the land, that is 32 lakh square kilometer, and holding 17.7% of population. That's what we were saying, 141 crore. That's what the UNO projected this time. The population clock said we are already 1.41 billion, and we are going to take over China in terms of population by the month of April, because then China will be where we will be number one nation. But you look at when we are having 32 lakh square kilometer of land area to support this population. China has 95 lakh square kilometer, whereas we are at par in population. Whereas America has 96 lakh square kilometer, and they have population one fourth new. They have only merely 33 or 34 crore population, whereas we are multiplied more than 4 times population, holding on the land, which is only one third of what that nation is. So that remains the greatest challenge, and that's the greatest threat. And unfortunately, we as Indian, we have to make sure that we trade land not as a commodity but as a gift of nature, and we preserve, protect, and make value addition so that it is able to play its own role. Because all human activities of living, working, food, everything, they're all performed on land, and that's what we have to make sure the land remains with us, and land is put to optimum use. And we have, they say, 140 million hectares, and that's land static in terms of agriculture. 80% every 5 year we are adding 1 crore farmer. The population has increased from 7 crore to 14 crores, 18% of the land holding is less than 1 hectare, And you can think of, if the land holding is less than 1 hectare, that is 2.5 acre, how can this land holding be economical for agriculture to the normal agriculture we are going therein? The land holding is decreasing because the population is increasing, land is not increasing, and there are only 7% farmers which own more than 2 hectares of land, and in majority of people who are migrating to the urban areas are basically the marginal farmer which have these kind of which have limited opportunity of gainful employment. So when we look at the we looked at the problem of this, once is the challenges posed by the land and the Indian agriculture, then we know there is large population inhabiting the urban rural area. Then we are finding that there's a problem of declining share in GDP. Can you think, in 1950-51, agriculture contributed half of the nation wealth, 51.88%. In 2013-14, it has come to 14% only, You can think of, it is it is just 1/4 of the total share, whereas the soft skill, which were the service sector, which was contributing around 30%, they have gone to 60%, and the industrial sector, which was 16%, has grown to 26%. So gradually you're finding the due to lack of innovation on the part of agriculture, we are losing the share of agriculture in the total wealth, and that's the money which is generating is getting lesser and lesser to be shared, and that is leading to poverty. Then we are looking at livelihood and employment, and you can find out that in rural India, that there are, we said, more than 50% of the people do not own land, they are simply to work as a laborer. That's the problem, and that's what well, once they are in laborer, there is an agriculture, is worked for intensively for about 3 to 4 months or maximum 6 months, and that's for other time, these people are either underemployed or unemployed, so you can find that this is what the total scenario is. 75% of the population below 5,000 monthly income. There are 56% household don't even own the land, and there is a 51% people are employed in the manual casual labor. You are seeing the poverty has been declining over the year, but the urban poverty has declined sharply as compared to rural poverty. As against 50% people living under poverty in 1995, they are counted to be only 25% of rural area, whereas the urban poverty is 13%. That means rural poverty is double the urban poverty, So there is a problem of literacy. There is a problem of, literacy both in male and female, which, leads to her lesser skilling in the rural India. And we find there is a large dropout at the, secondary level in the rural area as compared to urban area. So education remains an issue, and it's because of the lack of family commitment, migration, climate-induced disaster, famine, and poverty, which are trying to reduce the number of people going for higher education itself. Health remains another kind of indicator of growth and development, and if we find child infant mortality rate is much higher in urban India, in rural India, as compared to the urban India. Access to basic services in terms of household, electricity, toilets, drinking water, and your houses, the urban areas are invariably better placed than the rural India. Of course, with the number of missions launched in terms of, this providing electricity, Swachh Bharat Mission, Prime Minister Awas Yojana, Jal Jeevan Mission, the rural, share is improving, but nevertheless, they remain marginalized, muted, and diluted as when you look at the urban area. So you know the problem of water. Water, India has only 4% of water, but still 17.7% of the population. But in addition, we are to hold 59 crore of animals which are primarily located in the rural area, which also have to be fed. So the problem of water remains, and I hope with the water tap for every house that's under Jal Jeevan mission, the things will improve over the years. Housing remains another issue because the rural housing shortage of government of India target is to construct 2 crore houses in the rural India as compared to 1 crore in the urban India. But rural housing in majority of cases remain, poor in quality, in quantity, in safety, in stability, and the material, and in terms of infrastructure and services. Uh, Another factor is that the produce which rural India produces with so much effort, they are not compensated remuneratively by the traders. In fact, there's a longer chain between the producer and consumer. So the longer this chain, the higher is the pricing. So neither the producer is benefited, neither nor the consumer is benefited, and the intermediary make the money despite the fact they do not contribute or do not make any value addition. So unorganized marketing of the produce and non-remunerative prices are other reasons. And then there are no places where where there is a glut of some agriculture produce that can be stored. They are all perishing and they're all getting destroyed, and India loses around about the 25 to 30% of produce only due to this perishability and lack of scientific storage, etc. So if you crystallize the total problems of rural India, I think land remains an issue. Population, as I've explained, poverty also I have tried to touch upon. Problem of sanitation and cleanliness, literacy, skilling, infrastructure, then low level of irrigation of land, housing, haphazard unplanned development, healthcare and education, paucity, low human index, poor quality of life. There is less accessibility to the markets, fetching low prices. There is a low order of agro-based industries. There is a low, income and less employment opportunity. Pollution remains another problem. Health and hygiene is another issue. And we are losing a lot of fertile land and desertification due to erosion, overgrazing, deforestation, and we are basically, this is leading to low agriculture productivity and poverty. And large number of villages which are in the coastal area and which are, in the hills, they are prone to natural disaster, and there is a repeated destruction of human life and poverty, which promotes further poverty itself. So issues we are quantifying that large populations depending on agriculture, there is a low level of literacy. We are talking of the lack of employment, lack of female empowerment, and there is a problem of law and order, inadequate land reforms, inadequate infrastructure, productivity, large rural-urban divide, absence of technology in agriculture. There's a high degree of indebtedness and poor quality of life. There is inadequate storage capacity for horticulture and vegetable produce, which are remain perishable. Then there is poor skilling in agriculture. There's increasing social, economic, and cultural divide, and the rural society remains maximum divided, because they are based on divided on caste, economy, tradition, evocation, and that creates another kind of issues in the rural development. And there are lack of any planning and Development Agency, which can take care of the planned development of this, despite the fact we're holding large population. If you can, do a SWOT analysis of the rural India, they remain rich in natural wealth. They are, having large natural attributes. They of course provide all basic amenities. They have large population base. They can be promoter of economy. They are contributing to GDP, but they are basically suffering from problem of infrastructure, accessibility, land holding, literacy, education, healthcare, and outdated matter, practices. But rural India offers lot of opportunities to make agriculture more productive, scaling India, promoting higher growth rate, removing poverty, generating employment, making development cost effective. You can do, that you can rationalize the growth and development of rural, urban India, and making urban areas more rational, effective, and efficient. But if we don't look at the rural India, I think there will be chaos, unemployment, poverty, poor health, lower quality of life, and there will be problem of food and insecurity. And you can see the development of Indian city will go haywire, So, what are the options available with us after looking in terms of the entire problem, in terms of how we can promote the livability, sustainability, and make villages more green, inclusive, and safe, And this is what 17 goals. I think India need to adopt, these Indias are trying to achieve those SDG. And they are, you can see, you are looking at no poverty, no hunger. That is, good health, the quality education, gender equality, water, and then affordable and cleaner energy, decent work and economic growth, industrial innovation, inequalities, removing. You are trying to promote better cities, then you are going for responsible consumption and production, then all climate. And this is all basically related to rural India. They can't be, better place where they could be exercised and where the target needs to be achieved. So India must, they should not only focus on urban area. I think SDG should remain a focus if the rural emancipation has to be done. There are two ministries which are working in this area in India. That's Ministry of Rural Development and Ministry of Land Resources. They are trying to focus on eradicating poverty, creating opportunity and livelihood, creating safety nets, providing infrastructure and services, improving quality of life, and they are reaching to most disadvantaged. And in order to achieve those kind of objectives, ministry is, launching large number of programs. You have seen Manrega for providing wage employment, National Rural Livelihood Mission for Skilling India, then PAME, Growth, your Rural, your Gramin, Prime Minister Awas Yojana Gramin for housing, then Pradhan Mantri Sadak Yojana for connecting of the villages, then Rural Urban Mission for integrated development of village, then there is a watershed program for improving productivity, then there is a capacity building for rural functioning, then there are Sampuran Gramin Rozgar Yojana for private employment, for Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan for skilling, literate, making literate India. Then there is Sansad Adarsh Gramin Yojana by involving the MPs to adopt 3 villages and to make sure of their development. And then there is a national social assistance program for looking after the people who are in need, like sick, unemployment, old age, and senior citizen. Then Antodaya Anna Yojana, that's providing, assuring food to everybody at the most subsidized rate. And then the Pura, that is what our president, the late President Abdul Kalam, said that India needs to focus on rural area by providing urban infrastructure to create opportunity outside city and to prevent migration to urban areas. Mission Amrit Sarovar has been launched recently in the year 2022. That is 25 water bodies in each of the more than 700 districts to be developed for ensuring water. Of course, there is a Jal Jeevan mission, which is providing household tap connection to everybody, and then Switch Bharat mission, to take care of the solid and liquid waste management. In this endeavor, the government of India has been allocating larger resources for, the on year-to-year basis for the rural development itself. But we, as a planner, I think what could be the option if at all villages have to put in the fast track of growth and development, quality of life, housing, etc. I think they need to have a planned village development. And I would again come back to what the father of the nation said, that India lives in villages. If India will prosper if villages prosper. India will perish. If villages perish, India will perish too. And that's what, taking that idea forward, that I said that Pura was given as a concept by providing, urban amenity in rural India, so as though make rural villages on the path of growth and development. So villages, in order to make village develop, rural India develop, I think we have to, what we need to is empower people physically, socially, economical. We have to skill them, and we have to create adequate opportunity for their employment. We have to ensure simple and healthy, cost-effective living. We have to leverage the economy and for providing food security. Of course, if we go for the skilling and employment, I think we can generate employment, and we can, overcome the problem of unemployment in the rural area. We can eradicate poverty, and we can ensure quality of life. We can minimize migration to the urban India. We can minimize the growth of slums, haphazard, and unplanned development in the cities. So we can make cities only slumless if we are focusing on the rural India. And if we are providing housing for all, we can surely make sure the pressure on the urban India becomes less and less, and that will help in promoting planned development. And we can, majority of urban ills have the genesis and neglect of rural India. That's where we need to focus on the growth and development of rural area, both as a physical entity, as an economic entity, as a social entity, so as to achieve our goal of 5 trillion economy. But looking at the entire context of population, entire context of people getting concentrated in the rural area, I think there is a lot of scope for improvement of the rural areas. We can, by generating employment, by promoting industry, agro industries in the rural area, we can, focus on productive of agriculture sector. We can, have more synergy between rural and urban India. We need to limit the social stratification. We have to bring village community on the same platform. We can, eliminate social divide between urban and rural India. We improve the social physical infrastructure in rural area, improving education, quality of life, promoting literacy, modernizing agriculture, and making agriculture marketing more rational, providing more access to credit and loans, improving banking system, and you improving the scheme which are already in operation, making it there. So if you look at the entire context, the objective of the, village planning should revolve and aim at empowerment, enablement, accountability of Panchayati Raj institution, so that they are able to play their role in inclusive development and promoting social justice and efficient delivery of service. We have to promote holistic development of villages. We have to minimize urban-rural divide. We have to create urban opportunity in the rural areas to create a income playground for level ground for income option. We have to promote, make sure rural area remains connected and accessible with all its urban counterpart and all activities of gainful employment. We have to prevent distress migration from rural India to urban India. We have to guarantee a appropriate level of living, providing a basic amenity, making village a hub for attracting resources, providing faster and cheaper access to urban markets. Of course, land reforms remain very, very critical, and providing remunerating prices, agriculture, ensuring that will help in improving the income level, quality of life, and providing basic amenities. The objective of the rural planning and development shall be that fundamental principle be we have to make rural villages self-sufficient and self-contained in day-to-day needs. And you have to optimize whatever local resources is. You have to have economic empowerment, share of resources, generating appropriate employment, social empowerment, that you engage all people of communities in the village development, creating a rural sustainability. I think the most important and vital shall be creating a cooperative culture of living. Since we know the land holding is very, very small, and land holding cannot be, remunerative, because we are having land holding less than 1 hectare in case of 80% of the area. This does not, you know, help you having those mechanization and modernization. If all villages if villages form a cooperative, the land is held in cooperative basis, you will find, they will be having very less need of tractor. Can you think of Punjab have only 2.4% of land? Punjab hold 40% of tractors of the country. That's why the most of the Punjabis are in debt, and they, because the land is less than 2 acres, and that's how can you have a tractor and afford run with this. And that is the reason the productivity is less. But the kind of culture we have, we must have a tractor, but that, because you don't get, your son doesn't get married, your daughter doesn't get married, you don't have social status, and you are not valued. That's the reason why people are buying tractors, and they are getting into in debt, and that's what most of the farmers are committing suicide. If all the villages come together, hold the land in, as a joint one, but depend, in the ratio of their land holding, and they will need, then they all do agriculture in a combined, in a collaborative manner, and then, they have their own system of cooperative, of marketing, and diversification, and you will find they can take up the system of education, healthcare, everything, because this village will have money. They will be directly selling to the consumers, and therefore they will be able to generate wealth. I don't see any reason, India cannot, if all villagers in the rural India, they think working individually, I think they are heading for disaster. We are already seeing poverty will increase. They have to come, collaborate, cooperate, and they have to work on a cooperative basis, because we know 54% of the people don't own land. Where they are going to get their, you know, this employment? If the village are, their whole land in agriculture, those people can be gainfully employment. You can have industry at this place. You have marketing, you have so many opportunity, agro-based industries. You can put it right in the village itself. You can have all your network of distribution, everything, and you have bargaining power because you are working all together. So that, I think, should remain one of the agenda, and that's the way India can emancipate. So I think the going back to the development, I think it has to be inclusive development. We have to look for environment and ecology, plan development. We have to make villages self-sufficient in energy and resources. There's no problem. You have a solar energy, you have a gobar gas. Why we should have zero energy villages and zero waste villages? Because villages, there's gobar gas has enormous opportunities of feeding your kitchens, sourcing that gas for your kitchen, and also generating the, for this waste which can be used as fertilizer. So ultimately, the aim will be, objective will be to minimize the gap between urban and rural India, we have to minimize the social stratification, and we have to think about, how the agriculture can be leveraged to generate more economic opportunity in the urban area. And then, in order to appreciate, these kind of things, I'll be taking you quickly through the role of 73rd Amendment, and then regional planning, district planning, metropolitan planning, and the government of India. There are, aspirational district program and the rural urban mission. 73rd Amendment has been made, I think that is, if in the village, these were why the villages have not grown, because we people have not understood the role and importance of the rural governance. But 73rd Amendment, which was carried, 73rd and 74th, there were two amendments was carried out in 1992. 73rd Amendment focused on rural governance. Our 74th Amendment governed on urban governance. So in this case, villages were given a constitutional status. They are not entries, which are at the whims and fancies of the state, No, they are the constitutional entities, because they said there will be system of governance. Earlier there was a central government, there was a state government. Now there are government at the local level, at the urban level, at the rural level. In urban, I said there are corporation, there are municipalities, there are basically nagar panchayat and cantonment board. But in case the rural India, they also provided three-tier system of urban rural governance. That means it will be all by a democratic system. You have a village level, you have a block level, and you have a district level release. These organizations at the village level, you have a gram panchayat. At the block level, you have block samiti. At zilla level, they are all the district level. They are zilla parishad. They are all constitutional entity and manned by primarily the elected people, and they are the mandate to that is that they are holding the decentralized power of the governance, at the local level, with the high degree of autonomy and the local participation and involving elected people, So they have, that the village gram sabhas, they have been created, which will take all the decision with regard to rural development, where all the seats are filled by election. 1/3 goes to the women, and their reservation for scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. And it also provides for a state election commission to hold the election in fair and transparent manner. It also provides for state finance commission, so as to make sure that panchayats and all these institutions have adequate resources to take up their program. And let me also explain to you, it has also have a 11th schedule attached to it, which says 29 functions will be given to the rural India, and that's related to agriculture, land, irrigation, animal husbandry, a minor forest, and then small scale industry. Then there are rural housing, drinking water, fodder, roads, rural electrician, education, non-conventional sources of energy, technical training, then formal education, maintenance of public assets. You name anything, it includes all this. In the 12th schedule, which is in urban India, there are 18 functions, whereas in rural India, this is 11. There are 29 functions. And this is what that I think the rural India has to understand. They are agents. They can take up their own growth and development agenda, and they have they have a mandate to make sure that rural India grows as a institution, or self-contained and self-sufficient institution. In fact, that India have unfortunately gone for urban planning, or they gone for to a limited extent for rural planning. But I think regional planning remains very, very important. Regional planning has been adopted by all progressive countries, because regional planning integrates urban and rural settlements. They minimize migration. They make urban development more rational. They promote cooperation and collaboration between rural India. They minimize local competition, conflict, and they are, providing infrastructure optimization. They prevent disaster, promote, protect regional ecology, biodiversity, and promote regional activity, and they also make sure the redistribution of population within the region and also the industries and the employment opportunities. So this also helps in regional resources optimization, promoting synergy between rural and urban India, and also they are sharing their own strength and weaknesses to to be overcome. So this is what NCR has already done, National Capital Region. So I think region planning remains the first agenda. Then the constitution also provides there will be district planning committee constituted at all district levels, and this committee will take care of the growth and development of the all settlement, both rural and urban, in the district level. So they are comprising of elected representatives. Their mandate is to prepare a regional plan, this district plan, and that plan is to be prepared by combining the village plans and the urban plans which are falling in this. But unfortunately, this is half-hearted approach which have been adopted, because they are only to be preparing the draft district development plan. There is no mandate of final plan which this is to be done, and there is no agency to provide this. Similarly, for metropolitan planning, that means for largest city with more than 1 million population or more, two or three settlements which can be combined and made this metropolitan. These this committee has also been mandated to prepare a master. This is metropolitan plan, development plan, but they are all like district development plan. They are also given the mandate to prepare a plan with no role, with no agency available, and also no role in implementation. In fact, state of Punjab doesn't. Most of the the states do not have even the planning, these metropolitan area committees. So a government of India, in addition to for this rural development, also you know Menda has launched a program. This is known as aspirational district, and they identified 117 out of 742 districts which were very, very backward in terms of nutrition, education. They had indicators of agriculture development, water resources, financial inclusion, skill development, and basic infrastructure. And they are trying to develop these villages. You can see, on one hand, you have DPC, you have MPC, you have, these aspirational district. Of course, the government of India has now extended the scheme at the block level, and they are trying to focus on empowering villages socially, physical, and economical. This is what the aspirational district 117 are distributed over the countries, and they are trying to focus on what? Equitable district distribution of resources, and then integrated development of urban rural areas, removing disconnect between rural and urban settlement, and they are trying to go for integrated development and sharing of resources, providing more infrastructure and services, and generating resources. And we have also a mission which is now put in place, that is a RU urban mission, which is, they say that there are clusters which you can identify, and they have identified in the first last year it was 300 urban cluster which were to be developed in next 5 years, and these clusters were trying, basically looking at that, since villages are small, large in number, they have small population, it may not be possible to provide the infrastructure and services in all villages. So accordingly, they said, let those villages be seen in cluster, so that they can be used and planned in a cluster, as a cluster. So this was basically to preserve and nurture the sense of rural community based on equity, inclusiveness, without compromising with facilities, perceiving, providing the urban infrastructure, but retaining the rural culture. So the function, this was that you can have a population of 25 to 50,000 villages located within 5 to 10 kilometers in the, of course, in the desert and the hill areas, the population of 5 to 10, 5,000 to 15,000. And they were to be in the same area so that, they could be planned, integrated, and developed in a holistic manner. And the focus of this mission was skill development, agriculture services, digital literacy, water supply, sanitation, solid waste, and you name, metaling village streets, upgradation of inter-village roads connectivity, creating citizen services, and providing LPG connection, So they were the schemes which have been launched by Government of India, but we look at the methodology of village planning. I think visual planning should be different from the urban planning. It should be, it will be different for all villages. You will have to have a different plan. We don't have village plans. I think for all villages we need to have a base plan showing what the village is, where are the roads, which are the houses, which are the infrastructure, how the village is placed in terms of services. Unless those basic data and the socio-culture elements are not available, you will not be able to do justice. So I think we have to, our planning approach shall be based on the local climate, culture, and strength, making village self-sufficient and basic needs, improving quality of life, creating opportunity of employment, promoting community living, providing housing for all, providing clean water, sanitation, infrastructure, and accessibility, and creating options for education, healthcare, and recreation. You have a East Pankandar for village learning and vocation, space for village culture and industries, adopting self-help approach and creating local groups, and using local resources, creating more open spaces, and using green energy from solar gas, gobar gas for producing clean and for clean environment, and we have to make villager zero zero water and zero waste, and we must create options to maintain and this maintain the assets we create, and we have technology and skill to manage all those kind of things. In fact, village planning will have to revolve around four elements: sustainability, community involvement, connectivity, and technology, And I think we have to do in partnership of villagers and also involve them in planning and also implementation. In fact, the planning, entire physical planning of villages shall have to be different, I said, in intent, content, and scope to rural planning, but urban planning, and it must be based on empowering and making village more productive and more livable, and it should be based on having involving all stakeholder using simple direct techniques. So number one will involve panchayat. First will be panchayat involvement is very, very important to make them understand that whatever planning you are taken is for the larger, what is the objective, what is the scope, what will make value addition to the village, and what is the process that you are going to find adopt for this. And once you get the consent of the panchayat, I think the purpose has to be explained. Then we have a gram panchayat which comprises of all the residents, and they are all explained about the project, its benefits. They are trying to understand the problem, and they are trying to you know rationalize and overcome those problems. They will define the vision, and they will say what are the priorities you think about making this village a role model of development. You have a think tank comprising of elders, NGOs, panchayat who can advise and aid you for the planning, and then carrying out a SWOT analysis, carrying out a socio-economic demographic service, create a physical map for the village where you define the roads, infrastructure, services, everything which is there, so that you can quantify, and then you know what are the problems, where are the deficiency. You can think of what are the needs of this, and based on that, what is the you can a development plan will be created based on the studies made, analysis carried out, vision and priorities, and the problem identifying and understanding the needs and requirement of village and what you project that which village should be. And then after sharing this, getting it approved, then it's funding, that its funding shall be how, this will be funded, and this will be implemented, and funds can be sourced from state, from village, its own resources, grant and aid by and there are so many schemes which are central schemes, and there are MP led and MLA, and there are individual donation, because many people have gone abroad. They would like to contribute to the place, and they can be, ultimately bring out the development. So this model have to be, rationalized, redefined, depending upon, what the village structure is, what status is, what kind of, commitment they have, what kind of skill set they have, what kind of, involvement they have. So ultimately it's improving their quality of life, giving them, making them skilled, making them empowered. But I think we have three villages which are living in urban area, villages which are beyond municipal limit but still in the urbanizable area, and their rural villages. They will have to be treated differently. Urban villages will have to be, made integral part of the urban planning and development process, so that they get all those infrastructure and service. Urbanizable means they are planned on the defined norms and standards, so that they are ultimately rendered as self-sustaining in the long run, because tomorrow they are going to be inducted in the urban areas, so that they are all prepared for, being in developed in a rational manner. But rural villages will have to be retained as villages with basic amenities, infrastructure, employment, and then they will be producing the daily needs of the people in terms of village, their vegetable diaries, etc. And in fact, the effort shall be to make them self-contained, self-sufficient, empowered enough to, have the best of their produce and generate employment, so that, they are able to take care of their own needs. So village falling in hill area, plain and desert, coastal area will require different strategies and options, depending upon their condition, culture, climate, resources. This is one of the area where I've tried to show where the village falling within the municipal area, urban area, with the urbanizable area and the remote area, which were tried. But surely the system will only be through, convergence. I will define to you. There are six such stories which villages have done wonderful. Of course, may not be related to the physical planning, but physical planning remains largely absent. This is a village in called Dharnai in Bihar, and they have been, able to overcome all this poverty and generate employment only through a solar power, and that's what they have been able to achieve self-sufficiency in, resources, and they are now contributing to the grid and generating money. This is what in Pevir, Maharashtra, where they took up 182 hectare of land, the village which was a barren land and which was converted into community forest, and these people are now known for their organic sitafals and mangoes, and they are marketing in the Bombay market, and they're getting so much that they are able to generate employment. And this is a village which was suffering from perpetual need of, water. What they did, they took up this opportunity that they will not use they will not undertake crops which use agriculture. There's a lot of water. They went to horticulture, dairy farming, and they made sure that over a period of time they conserve water, and groundwaterizing. And today they have 294 open wells, and they don't have never called a single water tank since 1995. They have 60 millionaires and highest per capita income in the village. In Udanthru, that is in Tamil Nadu. Again, they have used the solar and wind energy, and they are providing free electricity to 8,000 residents. and they have created a corpus of 5 crore, and they are selling electricity to the Tamil Nadu board also. This is Nagaland, where they have used the agriculture, the practices, and to make sure that they are not only self-sufficient in food, but also they are able to generate resources, and they are able to practice the high-end this agriculture, and restore the strength of the soil to generate economy, etc. And this is the village which is known as technology village, known as Punsari, and where you have closed circuit cameras, water purifying plant, biogas, Wi-Fi, biometric mission. This is all done in 8 year, done at a cost of 16 crore, all raised by the village, only made possible by this Sarpanch, who was a teacher, he's Himanshu Patel. And this village offers the amenities of city, but spirit of a nation, of a village, but all its own effort by through technology. Melong, Meghalaya is the cleanest village. And this is one village I would show you, Pipalantri in Rajasthan, where they are doing a wonderful job, What they have done, the moment a girl is born in Rajasthan, the girls are not preferred. Here, what the panchayat did, that they combined the mission of the world, the girl child, as well as greening this. So what they do, whenever a girl is born, 111 trees are planted for that, and they are all taken care of. And as the girl grows, so the trees grow, and they have a fixed deposit for each girl. They get a affidavit sign from the parents that they'll educate the child, and during 9 years, last 9 years, over 2.5 lakh trees, over quarter million, 2.5 lakh trees have been planted in the village, and they are then they have another 25 lakh aloe vera plants have also been planted around them to prevent trees from termite, and they are they this by selling this, they are sourcing their livelihood. They have greened the village, and of course they have promoted education itself. I like to, after going through, I've not gone through the planning, because once I go through the planning of physical planning, I taken the role model. But I would suggest, that the planning, physical planning, will very, very important for the village, which needs to be taken. And for that, first, the plan of each village will be there. We can have a conservative surgery. We can have metaling of those, furnaces which are there. We can have open spaces. We can see, help, and we need to evolve a kind of, like we have a master plan for the cities. I think we have a model plan for the villages, which need to be done individually at all this, not sitting in the offices, etc. So ultimately, I think when we look at what we have done to our urban rural India, we find, that rural India still remains neglected, diluted, and marginalized, And that's what we find. There is a decaying rural India. I think India need to evolve, adopt a policy of regionalization along with policy of urbanization, so that we are able to take care of villages. We have to create a balance and synergy between urban and rural development, making urban and rural areas supportive of one another, both physically, socially, economically, inventory, structurally, culturally, and financially. Sharing amenities facility between both of them, creating appropriate employment, removing we can remove poverty in the rural India by skilling, by making agriculture more productive, scientific, reducing dependence on agriculture, prioritizing plant development, and we give priority to regional planning. We promote a culture of cooperation, sharing in villages for doing all activities. We leverage local culture, technology, art, and craft talent for skilling employment. We make villages self-sufficient in all day-to-day requirement, promote universal education and literacy, making rural planning and development integral part of academics. In fact, there are no courses which are dedicated to the rural development planning and management itself. And I think all technical institutions and all institutions of higher learning should have dedicated specialized courses for reorientation of the people who are involved in this. So if all technical institutions, you are all in the engineering college, architecture colleges, or in management colleges, or in polytechnic, please do one thing: adopt 2 or 3 villages, and then take them as a test case and support them with all your technical knowledge, expertise, and understanding. And you have all those skills, such you can do villages, make those selected villages as one of the role models. And I think you can do your job by promoting, even you can advising them on crop, you can having high value crop, you can promote, advise them on how to conserve water and preserve water, how to have green, greening villages. You can have make the villages zero, by this non-conventional sources of energy. You can look at zero energy and zero waste villages. You can think of creating options for rural urban development mission. I think yes, also where there is a need to convert, rather than having all somebody looking at employment, some looking at agriculture. I think they have to be clubbed together to look at holistically, because they are integrated, they are there. And then we have to make sure village panchayat, they are empowered. And of course, we need architects, planner, engineer, economists to come forward and to take up this task, to provide their knowledge in promoting the rural development. And then within the villages, I think we need to have a self-help group where people themselves take the onus of empowering their own colleagues, because there are a lot of educated people who are in rural India. They can still come forward, as a part of the agenda for rural growth and development. I think it will be important for all this to be done is that they create a village map. There should be a village map for every village, for 6 lakh village, where we can use technology. We have those drones, we have those satellite. I think all engineering institutions and all architecture institutions, they can do their job, in the evolving the basic plan. Once you have evolved a basic plan, I think it much easier, much quicker to take decision how to do the physical planning. But nevertheless, the village planning shall be not in isolation, not exclusion, but through a process of consultation, collaboration, cooperation, and that will do a great job. Thank you. Thank you very much. I've tried to communicate, but maybe basically I remain a planner, and my limitation is like this. I never wanted to communicate about that how do the physical planning, but physical planning remains important. Like they are going for smart cities, I think they should go for smart villages and model village, and that can help in India growing very rationally and logically. I'm closing. Thank you very much for your attention. Your question, I will try to answer it to my capacity, right?